Curious Lloyd.
Everybody loves a good mystery, which happens on our planet or something in our solar system. Whether that means telling you a supernatural phenomena that adds magic to your otherwise unexciting existence with a silly and obvious truth. But other than that, here are 5 famous mysteries that have finally been solved. The famous bloop. In 1997, the internet pretty much went nuts over an underwater sound recording heard by 2 separate microphones, which was placed 3,000 miles apart over the Pacific Ocean. Scientists had no idea what caused the mystery sound, but they referred it as the bloop. But they ominously reported that it sounded like it came from an animal, which was assumed as a really big animal. If you haven't already heard of it, take a quick listen. Well, at first, it sounds pretty believable that it could be a massive unknown underwater creature. But the true reality is, the bloop was just a sound of Antarctic ice cracking and had fallen into the water. So basically the same sound you hear when you drop an ice cube into a drink, but was magnified to a continental scale. And scientists had actually figured it out a long while ago. And in fact, sort of suspected it all a long time ago, since it sounded pretty much exactly the same as all the other times they have heard it happening. But as usual, the internet overreacted to this phenomena and expected scientists to discover an unimaginable massive underwater leviathan that will undoubtedly rise to destroy us all. The disappearance of bees. Can you remember when the news and media said that all the bees on Earth were mysteriously dying? Can you remember when all the apocalypse-themed movies and shows, from The Happening to The Knowing to Doctor Who, used it as a plot point? Remember when everyone inaccurately quoted Einstein in saying that the death of bees would quickly lead to the death of humankind? Well, let's get straight to the point. It's actually pesticides. And scientists figured it out back in 2014. The reduction in bee populations, formerly known as the colony collapse disorder, has conclusively been found to be a direct result of the increased result of a class of pesticides called neonicotinoids in recent years. We still don't know entirely why this happens, because exposure to neonicotinoids doesn't kill bees directly. They suspect that it actually makes bees more susceptible to disease. But the research from scientists is nevertheless pretty clear, and it has nothing to do with global warming. It's just poisons we've been spraying on our plants behaving like poisons. But apparently, it's actually okay. The bees are recovering just fine, partly because we have already put restrictions on those pesticides long ago, and partly because there are just so many bees out there, and we generally couldn't live without them. But when scientists say that bees are declining, you can take it the same way as like pandas or rhinos declining. They just mean that there are only 20 billion new bees born every day now, instead of 25 billion you could have expected 10 years ago. But also, I just want to add, if you ever have the chance to read up on bees, you should, as they have been around for over 100 million years. Alien lights on Ceres. In 2015, NASA's Dawn probe visited Ceres, a dwarf planet that sits between Mars and Jupiter, and it sent back some snapshots where one of the craters appears to be lit up like New York City. But let's face it, you can't really think of too many explanations that aren't aliens. The only real question is whether it's some kind of space laser powering up, or a massive alien city. But in all honesty, it's not an alien space station, it's just a moon. Well, a dwarf planet. But scientists were puzzled by this phenomenon for at least a couple of months, until they looked at it more closely and found that it was just a big pile of salt, which turned out to just be ordinary salt. It looks like it's glowing, because it reflects the sunlight much better than the dark ground around it. And while scientists are still super excited, it's only because that implies that Ceres had oceans in the past. But it isn't the kind of excitement that makes it to the newspapers. But you're probably thinking also, what about those amazing pictures of the crater, lighting up the whole side of the planet like a giant LED light bulb? Well, most newspapers just kind of glossed over the fact that these much more impressive photos are actually false colour enhancements. So in other words, they are photoshopped. So, sorry to burst your bubble if you believed that it was a super alien base. The bleeding religious statues. Since the olden days, people have been in astonishment of religious statues that appear to bleed as if from nowhere. It's a peculiarity of the human mindset that when blood starts pouring from the eyes of the Virgin Mary, people react with praise and worship, although it's actually not blood, it's just bacteria, and its scientific name is Serratia marcescens, and it's a common bacteria that likes to grow in damp areas and squeezes out a red pigment that in the right context can be mistaken for blood, and sometimes you can find plenty of it in your bathroom, but instead of worshipping it, you're more likely to take action with it with a scrubbing brush and bleach, and the same reason it winds up in your grout. It also likes the groove in the eye sockets of damp church statues, but given the appearance that they are crying blood, when what they are actually crying is the same stuff that came down from under the rim of your toilet or in your bathroom. The Marfa Lights. For around half a century, the town of Marfa in Texas has been host to a mysterious stretch of desert where locals frequently reported weird lights dancing on the horizon. The Marfa Lights have since become a tourist attraction, with observation points set up for any tourist that arrives. But this has been covered quite a lot on YouTube already. But for those who haven't seen it, or know what I'm on about, take a look. Well, in all honesty, you're probably thinking it must be aliens. But sorry to burst your bubble again, but they are just headlights, not from spaceships, but from cars. Physics students from the University of Texas went out to Marfa over a 4-night period to observe and concluded that the lights can be reliably attributed to the headlights of the vehicles travelling along nearby Route 67. So you're all probably thinking, how can the lights on the ground be mistaken for the lights in the sky? Well, that's actually kind of fascinating on its own, and its atmospheric conditions in the desert can bend light in such a way as to make it look like headlights are fading in and out or dancing around above the horizon, and it's a well-known phenomenon called a mirage. So if you know anyone that hasn't swayed anyone who was already invested in the alien theory, give them a knock on the head and tell them to get back into touch with reality. Although, it's not a question whether or not reality exists, but more of a question of how you can determine what is real or not real.